Hey everybody, and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not News, your favorite podcast about fake news. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kelly.
Hey Kelly, how are you? Are you in country? How are things going?
I'm back in the country for now.
Perfect.
I'm finally getting over some pretty bad jet lag. This time seemed to be worse. I don't know if maybe we're just getting older and we can't deal with it the same. But yeah, no, everything's going good. How are you?
Good. Things are, I didn't get a chance to leave the country, unfortunately. I kind of want to.
Canada's not far.
I know.
Just saying.
No, not far at all. So that's an option, I wish.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was looking at some things while you were gone that came through our email. And
I'm so glad you were keeping up the hard work.
I worked so hard while you were gone. You have no idea.
I bet you did.
So I saw this really interesting article, though, and it caught my eye, too, because the headline is, "Fake news can lead to false memories, claims new study." Study revolving around the abortion referendum in Ireland finds that it's very easy to implant false memories through spreading fabricated news about real-time events. And I thought, well, Kelly was just in Ireland.
I was. Yes.
This is like a sign from the fake news gods that this is our next episode.
Yeah, and I think it sounds really interesting. I remember when that referendum was going on, although I don't remember anything about false stories, but it sounds like this was more of a research study more than it was like they found propaganda given to people. Is that right?
Right. So basically there's some research out there about like do false memories help fake news spread? And so thinking about it in, let's say there was like a 24-hour news cycle, cable news network called maybe after an animal, like Otter News. And
Otter News.
And at Otter News, they just, were going after ratings, and they weren't necessarily concerned with like journalistic standards or editorial processes. And they also targeted a very specific political leaning segment of people.
I mean, you're really going on a limb
I
here.
know. Just imagine
that doesn't
this.
sound like something that people would ever be interested in.
Right. But imagine that this was true. And over at Otter News, they continually told the same lie over and over and over again, so much so that then people literally started remembering that event happening even though it didn't. Now, let me give you a very far-fetched example. Let's say, I don't know, like maybe like an advisor to the president maybe created a false memory and talked about a massacre that happened that didn't. I mean, that would never happen.
Right. I mean, who would need to make up a massacre when we live in this world in these times?
But there was that time that Kelly and Conway talked about the Bowling Green massacre on Fox News. That could be maybe an example of what we're talking about?
I mean, did that really even happen? Did she even really do that?
So this I thought was pretty interesting to think about. Do false memories like help with the spread of fake news? And so I sent you over this article, and it turns out there's been quite a few studies going on. And we took a look at the study that was just published as well as a couple of the older ones. And we thought it'd be fun to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, it really turned out to be a very interesting subject, and it sounds like we've discussed a little bit, but it does not sound like maybe we're totally in sync here. So I think this is going to be a really good conversation, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay, well, let's do this.
Okay.
So do you want to start with talking about the study that this article was based on?
Yeah, so one of the main researchers on this study has a huge background. She is one of the prominent researchers and investigators into the study of these false memories, and her name is Elizabeth Loftus, and I hope I'm saying that right.
I think you are.
But she was one of the researchers, and her theory is that the psychological effects of fake news is critical, given that the sophisticated technology that we're seeing more and more is making it easier to create not only fake news and fake images like we saw with the deep fakes.
Yeah.
So all of those things we're going to have to deal with that as a society. So now is the time that people are going to have to start really thinking about whether or not these are real stories and how they can figure out how to trust things. And so right now, what she said is people will act on their fake memories, and it's often hard to convince them that fake news is fake. With the growing ability to make news incredibly convincing, how are we going to help people avoid being misled? It's a problem that psychological scientists may be uniquely qualified to work on.
And this is where I agree with her and don't have any problems with her.
Right.
I personally have some problems with her for some of the other things that she does with her research. And
I think I know what you're talking about.
And some other things that she has done. So as far as what she's saying about the fake news part of it, and that we need to be aware of this and we can use the psychology to help with this, 100%. Yep, I agree. And I'm okay with her.
Yeah.
Where I get off track with her is she has done a lot of work disputing memories of children who have been sexually abused. And
well, I don't know that I agree with what you're saying. She's done a lot of work against regressive memory therapy.
Yes, that's true.
Which I do agree, but I do agree that there's a lot of evidence there that shows that these regressive memories are something can be implanted so easily. And I think that's what she's shown. But I agree with what you're saying. It did make me feel squeezy when I watched that TED Talk and she talked about the young girl who was abused and she was on the side of the mother.
Yeah. And the thing is, so I have recently had heard a podcast about that story, and they told it from both sides. And that young girl is actually a grown-up therapist at this point in her life, and has studied psychology and is very familiar with like everything that happened. And there's been a lot of dispute about whether that case was even this regressive therapy, like basically like the therapist that she was working with as a child who had videotaped her for like a child custody issue between the parents. She went back to him as an adult because she couldn't remember whether or not she had been abused by her mom. She had really like put that down, and her dad had passed away, and she was just kind of looking for answers for herself to really just make the decision on whether or not to explore a better relationship with her mother. Like she really wanted some answers on like, did this woman abuse me before I go have a relationship with her? And so when she watched the videos of herself as a child, she remembered the feelings and the things that had happened. So I think that's part of that. And this researcher like basically just inserted herself into this case and caused a lot of problems. So anyway, when she kind of dismissively talked about it in the TED Talk and kind of was like, I was sued and then I had to stop my research for 5 years. And she just kind of was like, it's all about me as a victim. And I was watching it and I was like, oh, I know. I remember hearing this on that podcast, this story. Like, that was really kind of messed up. I think that there's definitely some value in exploring, especially some of the stories and the cases where people come out and say like they were abused, like in like demonic ways and in like ritualistic, cult abuse that like doesn't make any sense and doesn't have any backup. Like, obviously memory can be messed with, and I think that is important to study. It's just
right. I hear what you're saying, but I also know that she didn't insert herself into that case, but she did publish a paper.
Yes.
But she called the girl Jane Doe. And so it is very odd that she just immediately was like, oh, you're libeling me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that story.
Named. So yeah, I mean, I don't know the other side of that story, but I can say from the research I've seen from her today, she is definitely on the side of getting rid of regressive, these repressed memory therapies.
Sure.
And even though it's anecdotal, I do have a friend whose mom went through that kind of therapy.
Right.
Learned or discovered that her stepfather had abused her. It wrecked her relationship with her mom. And then years and years later, she finally got to a point in therapy where she realized that had never happened.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there is some really good to it. And then there's maybe overstepping some boundaries of like not believing people that are saying that they were sexually abused. And that's where it gets uncomfortable is,
right.
We're like,
it's a very slippery slope. I would definitely agree that it's an ethically ambiguous area.
Yes. And she even says that in the TED Talk when she's talking about like, during this research, we planted false memories into people, and then she's like, and you may be asking, is this ethical? And you're like, yeah, I'm definitely starting to wonder that.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what she did in this experiment as well, the one that we're talking about in Ireland. And I can't say that it all comes from the 1996 study that she did, but she did with one of her undergraduate students. And this is Elizabeth Loftus.
Right.
She did a study with one of her undergrad students. It was extra credit for him, and he created this experiment, and then she was a co-author on the paper, but he finished the experiment as, I think, like his dissertation. But that was, what was it called? It's called Manufacturing False Memories Using Bits of Reality, and that was in 1996, and it's often referred to as the Lost in the Mall experiment. And in that, researchers used multiple narratives from subjects' childhood and included one false story. So there would be 4 stories from each research subject's background. And one of those stories would be false. And the false story was always how they got lost in the mall as a child. And then they were reunited with their family. They were rescued by someone and then reunited with their family. And in that study, which was 24 participants, which is not when you're doing a psychological, it's not too many, but you are doing individual experiments because you're having to find other stories from their background.
Right.
So it's intensive. It's just a smaller number. But in that study, 25% of participants reported remembering the false event, that getting lost, and even added details that weren't there, and said that one of the true stories was false.
Yeah, and I think what it boils down to for me is I don't have a problem with anybody researching this, and I don't have a problem with anybody trying to research it so that we can help combat it.
Yeah.
I think where I really split with her is she also is like, here's some ways that we can use false memories and implant them into people. For her big one is diet. Like she's like, you can use these false memories to make people like or dislike certain foods to make them healthier. And I'm just kind of like, it feels weird to be like, this is a really bad thing, but here, use it for this.
Yeah, I didn't agree with that either. And I am definitely on the same boat with you there because I do think that that's completely negating what actually causes most people to be obese, which is, there's just so many factors, including
Right.
a massive number of eating disorders that are dependent upon, the advertising, the diet
Right.
culture and advertising that spends billions upon billions of
It just,
dollars every year.
it feels like to me, like if we were like, we wanted to combat fake news with fake news. Like we were like, fake news is a big problem, so we're going to create fake news to combat fake news. Like it just feels like you're ending up on the wrong side of history by trying to solve a problem and then using your research on how to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
For
I can
something.
see what she's trying to do in my head. She believes that it's the greater good, but I don't know that I agree that that particular scenario is the greater good. Like, let's think of other things like maybe implanting. I'd rather implant stories about how, let's make the world a little bit of a better place. Let's, implant things that make people a little bit more empathetic to their fellow human beings. Stuff like that might be better than just, hey, you don't like salty foods anymore. Something like that.
Right. It feels like it's going down the road of like where we're gonna end up in a sci-fi movie, like in a pod with earphones on and a deep sleep, and like we're gonna be all living this alternate
Right.
reality that we're not aware of, like the fact that like there's no more oxygen left on the earth. Like it kind of like stinks of that.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I go back and forth on this because I can see where what she's saying in terms of, healthy foods and all this and sort of trying to do that subtle programming. I could see at the same time, because what she was saying is like you have a memory of getting sick from that food
Right.
and it makes you crave it less. But at the same time, aren't we inundated with exactly that thing in every advertisement, in every ad? Oh, this food's going to make you feel better. This is going to make you feel so good. This is exactly what you need to be happy. And because that's the expectation, it hits those serotonin levels. And so, isn't that almost the same form of manipulation? It's just not
Yeah.
being it's just
It's
not being done as out in the open as what she was saying. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it's a little bit less personal because I think advertising is like on a overall level where they're trying to give you like create a happy memory that you're going to associate with that product. But she's saying like she wants to create, or she wants you to create a specific memory where like a food made you sick as a child, and so that then you won't like it anymore.
Right.
And
I
I
think
don't.
I would say the NRA would do an ad about how immigrants are coming into your town and
Oh,
use that fear in order to
yeah.
get you to buy weapons and guns.
1,000%. Yes. Like
So,
it definitely, that's why this research is interesting. And I
right,
think that's like the good part of it and what we can talk about it. And it could be helpful in understanding is because we do have those ads that tell
right,
lies over and over again. I
right.
mean, a really good example would be like the John Kerry Swift boating campaign.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
That was just a lie that was just told over and over again. And if you ask people now, they just think that that happened,
Right,
even though it's been refuted. Like it is something that has become a part of people's memories.
right.
And so they think it happened.
Just like
So
those Willie Horton ads as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and there have been a couple other studies. So is there anything else you want to talk about that study before we move on? Any other important notes?
I think maybe something important that I felt like she said in her TED Talk, which we'll put up on our blog, is I thought this was a poignant statement, and it's how she ended it. She just said, memory, like liberty, is a fragile thing.
That is a very nice statement.
Yeah.
No, I mean, she's not wrong,
Right.
and she obviously is very well versed in this subject.
Right. But I think that you are correct. I think she is very I think she knows exactly what she's talking about, but I do definitely think it's one of those things where you have such tunnel vision that you're like, well, how can we, here's what we know this does. How can we use it to apply to something else without, scientists often don't have that voice in the back of their head that says, but what happens?
Right.
What happens after all that?
Right.
What's the downside to all that? Sometimes it's about, can you do it instead of should I do
Should
it?
you? Yes, exactly. Like, and I'm not saying that obviously studies need to go through ethical reviews and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in her case, it's so on the border of being unethical that it's something that she has to mention when she's talking about it. So, and I think that honestly, what we've read about with these studies where they are looking at the fake news part of it, it's much less invasive into the memories than some of the other studies that they talked about, like the childhood memory of being like lost in the mall and found by an elderly person is a little bit traumatic, and like that might change somebody's outlook for a really long time. I mean, they might have stress with having their own children at the mall because of that study that was done on them, versus the ones with the fake news studies. They basically just show them, like 5 articles, 4 of them are true, 1 of them isn't. And then they go back and like 5 weeks later, they ask them to, look at those same 5 articles and ask them which ones they think are true and which ones they think are false. And what they have found is that basically, if you read the false article before and you see it again, you're more likely to think it's true, and you're more likely to think that it comes from a reputable source. And so I feel like that type of research is a lot less life altering.
You think so? Because I would think that they would have told the participants that it wasn't true.
But can you, that
thing.
doesn't, is that going to take that out of your memory? Or like, you're going to go to the mall and have that reaction of, oh, I have to be more careful. I mean, so one time this is a long time ago, I woke up one day and I was just feeling kind of like depressed, and I didn't know why. And later that day, I got a phone call, and it was somebody from my family, and I was talking to them and I immediately felt better. And I said, oh, I know what happened. I dreamt last night that you died, and I was really sad all day. And I didn't even remember. It was making me sad. And then when I talked to that person and my mind was like, oh, they're alive, no worries,
Right.
It made me remember the dream and everything. So like I feel like if they've implanted that memory in them, it's something that is going to affect their emotional response to that situation in the future.
Yeah, but I think that society in general does a lot of this as well. So at least, I mean, there's a part of me that says at least they're doing it for a scientific reason.
Which is kind of what they say.
Yeah, because I mean, like Shay, my husband is from Ireland. We just got back from Ireland, and when we were there, we were joking around about how every town and everyone has this same cultural story. And we had it here in America too. But do you remember the Satanic Panic?
Vaguely, yeah.
So the Satanic Panic was really big in Ireland as well. And it was just, you think it's funny now, but they didn't used to think it was funny. Everyone used to believe that there was a group of Satanists who lived on the edge of town. It didn't matter what town you lived in. There were Satanists living on the edge of town. And
Right.
that's why you didn't go, like little kids weren't allowed to like walk outside of the town because there were Satanists out there. And, my husband was once in the situation where he was placed and left outside of town, and it was the most scared he had ever been. But that's all a cultural thing. That was, he got scared because that was just something everyone said, from your parents to the kids at school to everyone. Or,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you had this, but in my town, I had a haunted house that we had to drive by on a bus every day, and someone had definitely been murdered there. and some ghost definitely lived there, and the bus would drive by and you'd peek out the window and you'd cover your eyes sometimes, but you would look and see if anyone was like staring out those shutters at you. It's just, we all have these cultural things. Like she even brought up Santa Claus.
Right.
As we all have these cultural things that are basically fake things that we've implanted as a culture. So I don't love the idea of implanting memories, but at least I can say this is done for a scientific reason.
It is, and that's why it got through the ethical boards. But let's talk about how this affects fake news, because that is, I think, very interesting, and it is the point of our podcast. So there's a couple other studies that have been done over the years, and one of them I really liked, and that was the 2012 one from Danielle Poledge from the Central Washington University, just up in Ellensburg, which is not too far for us. And I thought this one was really good because it really focused the most, I think, on the fake news part of things.
Right.
And it is called Making Up History, False Memories of Fake News Stories. And this is where they did that with like the multiple news articles, and then they went back and had them read it.
Mm-hmm.
But they also talked about some other things in the past. So the point of this study was to attempt to replicate the finding that the exposure to false information changes the perceived truthfulness and plausibility of that information. And so back in 1977, there was a study done about the illusionary truth effect. And they found that subject rated repeated statements as true more than news statements. So basically, it says, many studies have demonstrated that repeating statements of uncertain truth tends to shift their truth value ratings toward the true end of the scale. So the illusionary truth effect was first observed by Hasher, Goldstein, and Topino in 1977, who found that subjects rated repeated statements as more true than news statements. And then there was another study done in 1989 that they, exposed people to a statement list in the first week and then the second week. And they were looking to see if they, found more validity in the statements that were non-repeated.
Right.
And then in 92, there was another study done about this as well. Increased familiarity. It's an automatic consequence of exposure, and its influence on rated truth is unintentional. So, and in that study, even when the subjects were warned that the source may not be credible, it didn't really influence them. They still found repeated statements to be more truthful. So they were looking to see if that was still true in their study. It goes on, there's a bunch more studies that have been done. And so what they did in the current study, so participants in the current experiment, they were exposed to the stories that should have knowledge of the fictitious stories, but the important question was whether they remembered or developed an explicit memory of how they found out about this information.
Oh, that makes sense.
So they were kind of looking at do they remember where they got it from?
Right.
As well.
So do you remember if you heard this from Fox News and Fox News is a fake news source,
right,
for the most part, then you might remember, oh, this is definitely a fake story. Like Kelly Conway said the words Bowling Green Massacre, so I know that shit is a lie.
Right. Exactly.
But yes, I understand what you're saying. That goes back to something that came from that research study as well, which said that people were more likely to believe the fake story if it aligns with their political belief or their ideological beliefs.
Yeah. Well, another thing that they found was that the exposure to the false stories increased the perceived plausibility and truthfulness of the stories. And this suggests that simply exposing participants to false information will increase their belief in the false information, which I think is what we see. I think that's very supported.
I think that's right. That's right. It's hard to it's definitely hard to get someone to understand what fake news is if they aren't on that same wavelength of, if they don't believe that Fox News is a fake news source, then
Right.
they're going to believe that mainstream news is fake news no matter what you say.
So you have some examples here, and I'm really curious to hear about them.
I did. I came up with some serious ones, and then I also came up with some fun ones.
Okay.
So you had already mentioned Bowling Green Massacre, which is a great one.
Favorite.
Yeah, it is. Even though I don't know that anyone actually ever believed in Bowling Green Massacre so much as it just became a joke, but Kelly Conway certainly seemed to believe it when she said it, for sure.
Yeah, like that's the thing, is she was having a false memory of an event happening.
Right.
So, yeah. And I don't think she ever came out and like corrected that and said like, oh yeah, I misspoke.
No.
It could be wrong, but I don't think she did.
I have no recollection of her doing so. She could have. So the first one that popped into my head when we even started talking about this subject was the McMartin preschool case, which I don't know if you remember, but it was back in the 80s. HBO did a movie on it that I watched ages and ages ago when it was on HBO, but it's about a whole family that ran a preschool, and one parent came in and said their child had been sexually abused, and by the end they used therapists with their therapy dolls, and by the end this family was a satanic cult. They had brought in lions and fed in children to lions. Like, it was the craziest of stories. And there was just no way that even a fraction of it could be true. And then in the long run, what they found out is the original parent who made the case was a mom who was experiencing schizophrenia and had some mental health challenges of her own. And so all of these people ended up not being or getting out of jail. I feel like some of them were found guilty and spent time in jail, which included like a 60, 70-year-old grandmother down to like a 22-year-old grandson who was part of the family, because this was a family business in a home. And they just destroyed these people's lives. And this went on forever. And I mean, they were getting death threats, and like, it really was a huge case in California.
I do remember hearing about that. And I just want to clarify really quick. I did look it up. Kellyanne Conway did say the day after the interview that she misspoke.
Of course.
She was talking about the 2011 arrest of 2 Iraqi refugees in Bowling Green on charges including attempting to provide material support to terrorists and Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
That's just exactly the same thing as a massacre.
Right, exactly. Yep, that same thing. Yeah. Okay, so sorry, just wanted to clarify before we got too far away from it.
Yeah. So then another example, of course, is alien abductions.
I don't know what you're talking about. Those aren't false memories, Kelly. You're walking a fine line here with me today.
Those are false memories that it seems like either people or culture itself has implanted in certain people's memories, especially if you, much like the flat earthers, if you get a lot of them together, there is even more evidence and makes them believe even more what happened to them was real. So that is definitely one of those things where the more your mind is already susceptible to that, the more likely you are to believe that has happened to you.
Okay, I'm not gonna say that 100% of alien abductions are not real.
Okay,
because
that's fine. We don't have to say that no alien abductions are real. I mean, I can say that, but you don't have to say that. But I definitely don't think that there are aliens at Area 51. And I don't think that there are people being lifted up and probed anally.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stories really focus on like them probing and like sexually abusing, and it's like I don't know that aliens would travel here just to be like, what's this hole for?
Right.
Like, yeah, it does seem odd
Are
that
there not other
that's
parts of your body they could have probed? Is that the only
right,
part that they were interested in?
right.
But yeah,
Yeah, seems a little odd.
it would be similar to like you find a brand new species. The first thing you do is not stick something up its rear end. You probably are like, well, what does this thing do first? What's it? How does it live? What does it eat?
Right, right.
So, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, that's a tinfoil hat one.
it is. So, and then there is my very favorite one.
Okay, I'm super interested in this one.
So there is a conspiracy theory about this, but I'm not getting into the conspiracy theory. I'm just saying that there is this cultural false memory, and it is Berenstain Bears, once upon a time being called the Berenstein Bears, not Berenstain, which is what they're actually called.
Okay.
People, even myself, believed that as a child, when they read the books, it was Berenstein Bears, and the name is actually Berenstain Bears.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's a funny one, and I've seen it talked about. The family talks about it a lot. And there's people who are like, this is where the timeline shifts to the darkest timeline, is where that's how you know there's a glitch in the Matrix, is because of this Berenstein versus Berenstain Bears. So it's a funny story, but at the same time, it's one of those things that like I absolutely am like, when I was a child, it was the Berenstein Bears. I could have told you that that's what it even said on the cover.
Wow.
And I used to watch the show and everything. I mean, I really believed that it was Berenstein Bears.
I I would have I didn't know about this. I think Berenstain is a better name. Berenstain?
Yeah.
That sounds odd. Okay, I have one for you. It made me think of it while you were saying that.
Okay.
Do you remember the movie that Sinbad did called Shazam?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Where he played
that,
the genie?
uh-huh,
Yeah.
that never happened.
What?
That movie does not exist.
It wait a minute.
Sorry,
Oh
is this,
no, is it Shaquille O'Neal?
and he's in Kazam.
You're right.
But
That's what I'm thinking.
literally, if you're from the 90s, and this is how the article starts. Sorry, 90s kids. Sinbad never starred as a genie in the movie called Shazam, despite what you think you recall.
Yeah.
The fact has not stopped multiple on the internet from believing in this fictional movie. I remember this movie.
But it was Shaq, right?
Yeah, in Kazam.
Yeah.
But I
That's crazy.
swear to God, Sinbad was in this movie called Shazam.
I don't know. Have you gone to IMDb and seen the movies that he's in? Because I bet he plays a genie in something.
People have looked for it and have tried to find it and to figure out what it is. So some have taken to label it the Mandela effect, wherein the facts appear to change for a population while others cry conspiracy. Oh, and listen, the whole mix-up has reminded people of the confusion earlier this year when it was revealed that the Berenstain Bears children books were not spelled Berenstein.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
So many people agree that they're merely confusing this movie with Kazam.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
That's so crazy.
So,
yeah, I would have absolutely said that that movie was real.
So even Sinbad himself has talked about it. And he thought that he solved it by revealing that in 1994 he hosted an afternoon of Sinbad movies wearing a turban. So there's like a photo of him kind of looking like a genie-ish.
Was that on his show?
Maybe.
Could be.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like I watched his show.
Yeah. So the internet's like, no, this exists. And people are like, they keep trying to find it. And I swear to God, I remember it. I'm like, no, but I remember that movie. Doesn't exist.
Wow. That's crazy.
Right?
But yeah. It's just like the Berenstain Bears, because as soon as I saw the books when my son was born and I was picking out some books, I was like, Berenstain Bears? Who are the Berenstain Bears? Who are the
Right.
Berenstain Bears?
Right.
Did these people just take over for the Berenstain Bears? And then I looked into it, and apparently it's this big thing. I think
Is
Craft
this
even did a
is this
podcast
just
on it.
like how they spell it in England versus America?
I don't know. It apparently it's. I mean, the son has gone into it because he took over the writing of the books, and they
Okay.
said this has been an issue since his dad was in elementary school when the teachers wanted to say that Berenstein was how his name should be pronounced. So, I mean, it could be one of those things. I don't know if you've ever heard of there's some sort of gorilla experiment
Uh-huh.
that it's a video experiment where you watch a video, and during the video, a gorilla walks through the video,
Oh,
but
right,
like
right.
90% of the people don't see him because it's not supposed to be there. So it's a blank spot.
Well, it's the video is telling you to focus on you're supposed to be doing something, like you're counting something or you're
Right,
looking at something while that's happening. And
right.
so I think that's part of it is that
Right, your brain is busy doing something else, so
yeah,
you don't sort of put those contextual clues together and see
right.
that thing. But yeah, that's what it reminds me of a little bit with that with the Berenstain. And I guess now the Shazam movie with Sinbad.
Right.
God.
Nope.
No,
Never happened.
never did.
Apparently, Sinbad himself has said, nope, I did not make that movie.
No. I wonder if he tried out for Kazam though.
Maybe.
You never
I
know.
don't know. I
He'd
don't
have
know.
to say.
But so what do you think about this with fake news? I mean, we have to be a little careful with this effect where if we keep hearing a lie told over and over again, we tend to believe it in the news.
Right.
So,
I mean, I think that what Dr.
Loftus.
Loftus, thank you.
Yeah.
I think what she said is pretty spot on, which is, people are being misled, but they're being misled all over the place. So, yes, I think that these fake news stories are important, but I think it's just important to be critical about everything at this point. I mean,
Right.
these deep fake videos are just getting worse and worse. And I don't know where we're going to be in 20 years in terms of being able to trust what we can see, what we can hear, what we read. It's just going to be a whole different ballgame, I think.
Yeah. Well, something to be aware of for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And to keep in mind, when you are, it's one of those things where, yeah, you do have to be kind of extra careful and make sure that you're getting your news again from reputable sources.
Right.
And that is kind of a hard thing when you're like, oh, I heard this on, where was that? Oh, remember there's that meme out there about listening to podcasts and you're like, was this a conversation I had with one of my real friends or was
Yeah.
this a conversation I heard on a podcast?
Yes. Yes.
Because it is kind of hard sometimes to remember, like, where did I hear this? What podcast was that? Was this an actual conversation that we had?
Yeah. It's hard, especially with a podcast, because you do feel like you're just sitting in on a conversation with friends.
Right.
The other day, I was listening to The Murder Squad with Billy Jensen and Paul Holes, and Billy Jensen said something, and I said out loud, "Oh, Billy, that's so crazy!" And I was like, "What am I doing? Why am I talking to him like he's in the room?"
You can't
But
hear me.
yeah,
What?
no, it was just like, "Oh yeah, well we're friends now, so
Right.
I'll just talk to you."
Right. But no, he actually, you don't know him.
Mm-mm, I don't.
He was just in Portland.
He
I mean, you
was, and
could
I was
know
out of the
him.
country, so unfortunately, I wasn't able to meet him, even though Billy Jensen would be my favorite.
Yeah, that's a great podcast too. I've listened to a couple episodes and I really like it. So
Yeah, and his book is great too.
nice. Nice. Well, hey, speaking of books, should we
Yes,
move on to our jam of the week?
let's do it.
I might have a false memory about who went first last time.
Oh, I don't even know. It's been so long.
I know.
I'm
really
happy to go first.
You know what it was? We were recording with Terry Ewan.
Oh, that's right. She went first.
She went first. Darn it.
Yes. I'm happy to go first.
Okay, go for it.
I think you'll like my choice this week.
Oh, perfect.
I do like Billy's book, but that wasn't my choice for this week. My choice for this week is Elizabeth Warren's book, A Fighting Chance.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And love your choice.
Yes, that is a great book. It talks a lot about her work. I mean, the majority of it is her work with working on bankruptcy. It's her life story. So it goes more into her background and her personal story, but it also talks a lot about her work at Harvard, working with bankruptcy law, and then going into the group that was supposed to regulate the money that came from the Fed to the banks that were too big to fail.
Yes.
It didn't always work out that way, but she talked a lot about her relationship with Obama and the Consumer Protection Agency. So it's just very, very good. And it reminded me that, you know, we need someone who knows what they're doing and someone who has a good head on their shoulders, someone who can talk to all kinds of people.
Yes.
And yeah, I was really excited. And I've always been on the Warren train, but I'm even further along than I used to be.
Okay, I'm literally going right now to Amazon to order a copy. And because this is our podcast and we can do whatever the fuck we want, I will say Elizabeth Warren's campaign is using the Reach app. And if you download that to your phone, you can interview your friends about who's their choice right now for a presidential candidate and also why. And you can put that information into the app and it will go back to the campaign and let them know like what people really cool. are, wanting to have their candidate focus on. So I would encourage all of you to reach out to the Reach app. Yeah. Find somebody who's working on her campaign and ask them to fill it out for you. So, or join the campaign and fill it out. And then all of your friends.
And Mom, if you're listening, she's the best candidate.
Yes.
I'm still working.
Anybody who's
working on that one.
Yeah. You know what will be fun is when we listen to this, like when we listen to this episode in a couple of years back, and we're like, oh, that's so cute. That's when she hadn't even won the primary yet.
Yeah. Back then, before she was president.
Right. I can't wait for that.
Yes.
That'll be awesome.
It will be awesome.
Nice. Well, I definitely am going to order that book and I will read it. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think it's her only book, but I definitely I enjoyed it. I thought it flowed really well. She does all the narration for it, so the audiobook was fantastic.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, I pulled my jam of the week. I actually went to a concert last week and I went and saw Iron and Wine.
Yay!
Yeah, who's like the band that if I was going to quit my job and buy a van and follow a band around the country, it would be Iron and Wine.
Aww.
And this is the second time I've seen them live. And I pretty much anytime that they are going to come through Portland, I don't care what they're doing. This time they were with a band called Calixo. And it was like a Spanish band from Arizona. And it was great. I don't care. I will watch Iron and Wine do anything, whatever. So... And I realized, for whatever reason, I don't know that I've ever even done a jam of the week with them. And I was like, well, that's a huge oversight. It needs to be corrected immediately. I might have done one.
I think you've done one because I definitely knew of your love for Iron and Wine.
I definitely have a love for Iron and Wine.
And I really like Iron and Wine too. It's one of those bands that I am not usually a mellow tempo music person.
Indie. He's more indie.
Yeah. But he's more laid back in style of music. He's not a heavy metal or stoner rock or even hardcore rap.
No, he's not that.
But yeah, no, I enjoy his music.
The song that I picked for this one was American Mouth, Flightless Bird. And the reason I picked it is because he did play it live at the concert. So I got to hear him play it live again.
Yeah.
And it's a great song. Loved it forever. Of course, it was in Twilight. And so, like, on the YouTube video for it, like, everybody's like, Twilight, Twilight, Twilight. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. But also, this song was out way before. It's not like he wrote it for Twilight.
Right.
Like, so, but that is my jam of the week. And if you have a chance to go see Iron and Wine in concert, I would definitely do it.
Very cool. I mean, it looked like you had a great time.
I did. No false memories had to be implanted.
No.
I had a good time.
All on your own. No,
All
not
on
by
my own.
yourself, but I mean, you had a
Right.
great time with your own.
At the concert.
Yes.
And hopefully I will remember it correctly as much as I can.
I believe
with
in
my
you.
faulty human memory.
The older I get, the better my memory is. No,
right.
It's completely
You know, have you heard of the people, I think it's called HSAM, where they have, like, they remember a lot, like way more, like photographic memories. There's only like 60 people in the world that have been diagnosed with this. There was
Isn't there a celebrity
This
that
American Life did an episode about it, and they just recently reran it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that they talk about is the people with HSAM is they have a really hard time getting over things because they can't forget, and they have a really hard time moving on from things sometimes. And it was it's a very interesting episode to listen to and to hear about some of it. But yeah, like one of the guys that they featured, like he's really, like, the people who have that memory, they don't remember every single detail of every single thing. They kind of like they'll be good at one thing, and he's really good at TV shows. And so you can say what day of the week was March 13th, 1994, and he'll tell you what day of the week it was, what the weather was like, what he was doing. Or they asked him, she's like, okay, which episode was it where Rachel quit her job and for Friends? And he was like, oh, it was this episode. It aired on this date. Like, he can just remember that. But he also had a relationship end that had only been a couple months long, and 2 years later, he could recall every detail and couldn't move on from it. So it was just very interesting. Like, memory is a very interesting beast.
Yes.
For sure.
It really is. I know that there's some celebrity out there who has a photographic memory. I don't remember who it is.
Right, because we don't have that issue.
Yeah, because I don't have a photographic memory.
I don't have
so I don't remember who it was, but I do remember seeing an interview with them. It might have even been on Oprah. Like, that's how long it was ago.
Right.
But yeah, I don't remember. Darn it. But yeah, it's always crazy. The people who can remember, I always think it's not crazy, but it's a very interesting how the brain works.
Yeah. It's just different, from how your and I's brain works. Like,
right.
To them, it's just normal. And, one of the ladies on there said that, she wouldn't want to not have her memories, even though they do weigh her down.
Right. Right. That
because
makes sense.
Then she feels like, but I wouldn't remember my life. Like, she's 50 and she remembers everything from when she was 5 on, but she has a hard time letting go. Like, she still is like mad about something that happened in college.
Yeah, that's, I don't know. That seems sort of sad.
Yeah, it's odd in a way. So the memory is very tricky, and unfortunately, at times it also leads to fake news. Yeah. So
that's true. We just talked about that.
We did. We're bringing it back around. All right. Well, everybody, we will be back in 2 weeks. And I think we actually will be back in 2 weeks. Like, we're back. Like, we're not traveling. We're back.
Yep. Summer's over.
Summer's over. Let's do this. All right. Well, until next time, don't forget. Yeah. And don't forget.
Don't forget.
Spread jam.
Not lies.
And we're back. We forgot.
We forgot. That's what happens.
To tell you where to find us. Oh my gosh. Kelly.
It's not for too long.
Can you do this? Can you do it? I don't know if I can do it.
I think I can. So you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook at Podcast Fake News. You can find us on Twitter at Podcast Fake News. You can send us an email on Gmail, podcastfakenews@gmail.com. And you can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes.
Right.
I can't believe it's not news.
You can read our blog at www.podcastfakenews.com.
That's right.
Yep. Okay. I think we got them.
I think we did too.
Oh,
and again,
spread jam.
Not lies.